Welcome to webinar number 1 in our series of 6 recordings. The goal of the recorded webinar series is to provide information related to cross-sector and occupational transferability assessments for a variety of audiences, including employers, job seekers, and career and employment practitioners. This webinar explains the methodology to assess the transferability between sectors, as well as occupations and skills within those sectors. The information covered in this webinar can be found in the Energy Career Transition and Employment resource in careertransitions.ca. This webinar has been made possible through funding provided by the Alberta Government to Petro LMI, a division of Energy Safety Canada. The resource has been developed to help address the labour market inefficiencies created by the downturn in the oil and gas industry by sharing the opportunities for workers coming from the oil and gas industry in order to leverage their skills, knowledge, and experience to gain employment in other sectors. The objectives of the webinar are to explain the methodology used in the Energy Career Transition and Employment resource to assess the transferability between sectors, as well as occupations and skills within those sectors. This includes a summary of the transferability assessment results for in-scope sectors, criteria for occupational transferability, and foot-in-the-door requirements for occupations in sectors assessed to have reasonable transferability. These are the minimum qualification, skills, and experience employers are typically looking for to enter these occupations. Key drivers of employment and recommended resources to help track industry activity. We also provide ways job seekers, career and employment practitioners, and employers can use this information and stay connected. So, for example, employers can use the resource to determine other sectors in the economy where they can find the skills and experience they need. Job seekers and career and employment practitioners that support them can use it to determine the best path to employment in another sector and to understand the upgrading that might be needed. While the resource focuses specifically on the transferability between unemployed and underemployed oil and gas workers and other sectors within Alberta's economy, the methodology is applicable across all talent pools and sectors. Why are we doing this work? Well, Canada's industries are evolving, and as industries evolve, so too do their activities, processes, and technologies to deliver products and services. It's so important to be aware of what's happening in your industry and others. We have an example to illustrate this using the oil and gas industry. The 2014 downturn signaled the need for a shift in industry's business model. The reason the energy industry is evolving is, quite frankly, because it has to. Between 2014 and the end of 2019, the oil and gas industry shed approximately 25% of its direct jobs. That's around 50,000 of its workers. Let's explore some of the ways industry has changed and will continue to since 2014. At that time, commodity scarcity was driving higher prices, and the world's sources of new production were unstable. The U.S. was Canada's primary customer. Our production here in Canada was growing due to the oil sands through large greenfield infrastructure projects. Unlike today, decarbonization was mainly driven by government policy and regulation. Industry's use of technology could be referred to as Industry 3.0. This is a digital world focused on automation, vertical data collection and use, and one-way machine-to-human communication. Today, the industry continues to undergo a structural shift, needing to fundamentally change its business model to sustain itself. It looks different from 2014 in that there is an abundance in the industry's commodity, much lower prices, and stable sources of production from the U.S., who is now our key competitor rather than customer. Demand is being driven by developing countries, and our approach to increasing production and productivity is through asset optimization and maintenance, creating much lower job growth. Decarbonization efforts play a central role, being driven by policy and regulation, as well as investors' interest in environmental improvements. Industry 4.0 is characterized by a focus on data storage, processing, and connectivity via Internet of Things, horizontally integrated data, two-way machine-to-human and machine-to-machine communication, and robotics, AI, and machine learning. This is unlike other downturns when prices were expected to recover, and along with that, industry activity. These shifts are not unique to the oil and gas industry. Agriculture, mining, chemical manufacturing are examples of other industries also undergoing shifts. What the oil and gas industry does well are fundamentals that are not going away. The industry is adept and skilled, technically, technologically, with regulation, environmentally, socially, with safety, and organizationally. You can use these examples from oil and gas to observe shifts in capabilities that are vital in other sectors. This will help you to apply skills and knowledge you developed in any industry into the transitioning economy, thinking about how is your industry evolving? What strengths will be leveraged? How does your area of expertise contribute? Using information from the resource, I'd like to now introduce our methodologies for assessing transferability on two levels, sectoral and occupational. We'll start with sector-to-sector transferability and how to assess this as it relates to you. CareerTransitions.ca includes a comprehensive resource targeted for oil and gas workers to assess opportunities in other sectors based on their transferable skills. These sectors include agribusiness, supply chain, petrochemical manufacturing, pure high-tech and oil and gas, clean tech, power generation, oil and gas services, liquefied natural gas, and industrial construction and maintenance. For those of you from different sectors other than oil and gas, you can also use the resource to assess your transferability and how to leverage your experience into another sector. Let's learn more about that now. The resource includes an assessment of sectoral transferability from oil and gas to selected sectors in Alberta's economy using three criteria. These are technical transferability, similarities between core qualifications, certifications, technical knowledge and skills, business processes, use of equipment and technology, the regulatory environment, as well as customers and stakeholders. Nature of work transferability. This is similarities in work arrangements, workplace culture, relationships, and environments. Value proposition transferability. This is the likelihood of workers accepting an employment offer based on factors such as total compensation, location of work, career development opportunities. For each of the criteria, transferability to the selected sectors are rated as high, medium, or low. Next, I'll show you the results of our transferability assessment. For those of you with oil and gas experience, you can use this assessment to focus and narrow your job search. For any sector, these criteria can also be used to conduct your own sector-to-sector transferability assessment. If your sector focus is different than those we included in the resource, you will need to do additional research into the sectors of interest to you to focus your job search. Based on the available oil and gas talent pool, this slide shows our sector-to-sector transferability assessment results for sectors in the energy ecosystem with high and medium transferability. For example, the transferability from oil and gas to petrochemicals is high across all three criteria. However, for pure high tech, the transferability is low across all three criteria, unless the high tech role is within the oil and gas industry. In this case, oil and gas knowledge and an understanding of its data problems can be beneficial to knowing how to apply digital solutions to solving these data problems. Remember, these are sector-to-sector transferability results. These results may look different at an individual level. For example, if an individual comes from the oil and gas industry as a software developer, in this case, the transferability to high tech would be rated higher, at least in technical transferability. These assessments provide some interesting observations about the value of oil and gas experience. What we found is that much of Alberta's untapped talent are technically well suited for emerging sectors that are adjacent to oil and gas. Examples include petrochemical, clean tech, and geothermal. Even in these cases, some level of technical upskilling will likely be required to respond to shifts in technology, regulations, and equipment, etc. Shifts may also be required to be successful in a new workplace culture. Clean tech companies tend to be small and maybe startups. Few sectors are going to offer the same compensation that oil and gas does or did. For a detailed rationale of how we arrived at these assessment results, go to the resource. Understanding the activities that are more likely to result in an industry generating employment is an important consideration for a job seeker looking to transition into a different sector. The drivers of labor demand that we recommend following are investment announcements, government programs, and/or economic incentives for growth, changing regulations, an aging workforce demographics, which is a signal that a sector may be replacing retirees. Tracking activities such as these provides insight into the potential number and timing of job opportunities in a sector. They are the lead indicators of employment that we follow. These timelines, current, short-term, medium-term, and long-term, relate to a reasonable line of sight from a job seeker's perspective. This slide summarizes the steps we have gone through to assess sector-to-sector transferability and the how-tos that can be used for any sector. This will help you to use and apply the resource to your own situation. Step 1. Rate your transferability to another sector as low, medium, or high based on the 3 transferability criteria we've just gone through: technical transferability, nature of work transferability, and employee value proposition. You can do this by reviewing job postings and descriptions of jobs for qualifications and networking with employers or employees in the targeted sector, as well as recruiters. Step 2, assess the timing of demand in the sector so you have an informed understanding of the timing of the jobs as either short-term, medium-term, or long-term. You can do this by gathering information about those key drivers of demand we reference through following recruitment ads, industry association articles, and news and company announcements. More detailed resources for the energy ecosystem are covered later in the webinar. Using information from the resource, I will introduce our methodology for assessing occupational transferability. The resource includes an assessment of occupational transferability to key sectors in Alberta's economy for oil and gas occupations in the talent pool by categorizing occupational transferability in three ways: direct, refocus, and reboot. If an oil and gas occupation is directly transferable to another sector, then the core qualifications, skills, and knowledge requirements are essentially the same. This means that there is a high likelihood that a candidate with high transferability can be successfully recruited and will be a good fit to be retained in the sector, directly transferable. If an individual's core qualification, skills, and knowledge requirements are very similar, but will likely require some skill and or knowledge upgrading to increase the likelihood of recruitment success, then the occupational transferability rating is a refocus. Finally, if an individual's core qualifications, skills, and knowledge requirements are dissimilar, and the candidate will need to invest significant effort and resources to qualify for a position, then the transferability assessment is REBOOT. For some, it may also be necessary to consider a relocation. For those of you with oil and gas experience, you can look at the transferability by occupation section of the resource, which provides a pretty comprehensive table showing you the sectors where your occupation is employed. This will help to focus and narrow your job search. Others can also use these occupation transferability criteria to conduct your own occupation to occupation transferability assessment. However, a suggested starting point for anyone wanting additional help to explore their transferability options is webinar number 2, Starting with You, Exercises to Explore Career Transition. The resource also provides foot-in-the-door skills needed for the unemployed and underemployed oil and gas talent pool to transition into a similar occupation in another sector. The foot-in-the-door requirements are the foundational qualifications, skills, experience, and or aptitudes required to compete with experienced candidates. And the transferability of skills, as we've already gone through, for unemployed and underemployed oil and gas workers to occupations in targeted sectors are those assessed to be direct, requiring a refocus, or a total reboot. For some sectors, those jobs already exist in oil and gas. This slide summarizes the steps to assess occupation to occupation transferability that we've just gone through and the how-tos that can be used for any sector. So step 1, assess what it would take to transition to jobs in another sector. Is it direct? Is it a refocus? Is it a reboot? Or do you need to relocate? So to do this, go through a research process by looking at job qualifications and the work environment for jobs in other sectors by reviewing job postings and ads, networking with employers or employees in targeted sectors or recruiters for those sectors. 2, identify the foot-in-the-door requirements that you either have or could obtain for selected occupations. And remember, these are the foundational qualification, skills, experience, and aptitudes. Again, this is accomplished by researching job qualifications and work environments through a review of job postings and ads. And networking with employers or employees in targeted sectors as well as recruiters. Step 3. Assess your interest and willingness to reboot or relocate. If these are options you're willing to look at, then you should be prepared to consider further education to support career change and other locations where jobs are in demand. More detailed resources for the energy ecosystem are covered later in the webinar. Now I'd like to give you an overview of what else you'll find in the Energy Career Transition and Employment resource. For all the sectors we include in the assessment, you'll find a full rationale for our assessment. You'll also find additional information on those sectors deemed to have reasonable transferability, given the skills and knowledge gained in oil and gas. These include the key drivers of activity and employment generation, activities and occupations across the industry's life cycle or value chain, and occupational transferability assessment as being direct, refocus, or reboot. For the occupations, we'll also define the foot in the door or the essential requirements. We are continuing to monitor the environment and our assessment of demand and making updates to the resource as needed. Now I'd like to share some job seeker tips for monitoring when employment and jobs are going to be available. On the left, you'll see examples of leading indicators of job growth and hiring. For example, announcements from companies and industry associations, announcements of spending or projects being reinstated, corporate guidance on spending on things such as accelerated technology implementation, information about supply chains and contractors used, and so on. These are all concrete examples of what we monitor on an ongoing basis and information that is specific to the energy ecosystem. These go well beyond what you may read about in mainstream media and provide resources at the level of an industry, a profession, and a geographic region. For many of them, you can sign up for and get regular updates into your inbox. We're all familiar with job boards, but one we especially like is worksica.com. This is a website that consolidates current and historical job posting and allows you to do your own searches. Key questions to ask yourself as you review information on the leading indicators we've pointed out are: how does this information impact employment in this sector? How might it impact employment for my occupation? And is there anything I need to do to stay current or to improve my work resiliency? Our career transition work continues to be expanded and enhanced. We offer a number of opportunities to stay connected and up to date on our latest research and insights. Follow us on our business LinkedIn page, Talent Needs for the Evolving Energy Ecosystem. Take our survey and help us to educate employers about Alberta's available talent. It's on SurveyMonkey and the link is here. Please share it. Use and share the resource at careertransitions.ca. Attend a job seeker or career practitioner virtual workshop. There are different formats available for job seekers or career practitioners. These will be posted on LinkedIn. And finally, contact us if you have any questions or to share your success stories on LinkedIn, either on our business page or our personal pages for Pat Huffnagel-Smith or Cheryl Knight. And finally, please check out our other recorded webinars. This is the completion of webinar number 1 on sector and occupational transferability. Webinar number 2 is very individually focused, called Starting With You, Exercises to Explore a Career Transition. The remaining 4 webinars have a specific sector focus. Webinar number 3 is about the evolving energy ecosystem and its impact on the oil and gas services sector. And webinars 4, 5, and 6 focus on career transferability from oil and gas into 3 different sectors: clean tech, high tech, and heavy industrial construction and maintenance. We're at the end of webinar number 1. We hope that you've enjoyed it, learned something, and have taken something away to kickstart your job and career search.